In the book of Deuteronomy, there is a prayer that is known as the Shema, and it is a prayer that is said and prayed by Jewish people daily, and it talks about Israel, the whole people of Israel, to hear the words that God is one, that God is the one true God, God is the one to turn to and to worship, to listen and obey the commands. And throughout Israel's history, this is a God who led the people out of slavery into freedom, and Moses led them through this wilderness. Moses couldn't go into the promised land, but as a people, they remembered going into the promised land who God is and what God calls them to do through the laws that had been given to them. And Joshua was the one to lead them into this promised land. And before Joshua dies, Joshua tells them this phrase, remember who God is. Remember to obey the commandments. Remember the covenant, the promise that God made with you, and to always turn to God. And the people made this kind of committal and in the assembly to say, we will remember who God is. And that famous phrase, maybe you've seen it on some home decor, comes from that end of the book of Joshua. It says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. This is the identity of the people of Israel, of people who are not ruled by kings and government systems, but instead look to the living God as the one to turn towards. And for many years after Joshua's death, that was surely the case. But then people started to turn other ways. People started to look to other gods to worship, and other people were invading them, and they were turning to their own ways of domination. And so then they were turning away from God. So with Joshua gone, and no real strong leadership presence, who is it that God calls next in this biblical story that we read? And this is where it leads to our next Bible study called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, as we do a Bible study on the book of Judges. Now, after the leadership of Joshua, there were leaders who led the Israelites, but there were judges. When the people turned away from God, God raised up these judges to turn the people back towards God's self, to remind them who they are, to point to the sin that was happening in their lives. And these judges were also military people, because the Israelites were being invaded from so many different directions, that God would raise up not only a leader to direct the people back to God, but also one to help save the people. And we are going to study for a few weeks in Bible study these different judges. Maybe these are stories that you haven't had a chance to read. Judges isn't a book that is often studied, so I encourage you to come as we dive into these stories and we see how God works through many different people. And we also are going to talk about a major theme that happens in this book, sin. What is the cycle of sin? How do we see sin as turning away from God? And what is the process that happens in God calling up these judges and calling people back towards God? So I hope that you'll join us on Thursday as we dive into the book of Judges. See you then.